Han Kong-chi always wanted to be number one, whether it was in studies, sports, or video games, but nothing good ever came out of it. He had heard that everyone had a natural talent, though he didn't know why his own had never been discovered. He wondered more than once if there was a job in which he could be better at something than others. One day on his way home from school, Kong-chi came across two healthy men who obviously spared no expense on Botox. They offered to let the kid know the truth if he had the money to pay for the expensive enlightenment. Khan made it clear that his pockets were empty, which sparked a heated argument between the crooks. Discounting the truth, they began to work out exactly who would get their share, which the young man took advantage of. The men obviously did not like the fact that this impudent man decided to get away by talking their teeth, and therefore turned to forceful methods, began to slap Kong-chi one after another, demanding to give all the money that he has with him. Wanting to stop this outrage, the young man involuntarily swung his arm, but, surprisingly, the blow was so strong that the unconscious body of the fat man flew a couple of meters before falling down, breaking the asphalt. The same fate befell the second rogue. Kong-chi didn't fully understand whether it was chance or fate, but that day, his hidden talent had finally awakened. He had no doubt that he could now become number one with such incredible strength. Yet the fellow to whom the story was told was puzzled as to what the use of ordinary physical strength was, that is, what heights could be achieved by simply swinging his fists. In order to find the answer, the bespectacled man looked into the book, and it soon revealed two paths for a Korean high school student where such talent could help. The first is to become a first-class athlete and bring glory to the country, but this will require a lot of capital, at least to hire a good coach. The second option is a career as a military officer, police officer, or even a firefighter. Become a guarantor of security and justice, get a government position and a stable future. But it is worth taking into account the huge competition and an excellent certificate. Given that his parents are not businessmen and his school performance leaves much to be desired, his friend advised him to give up. After all, Kong-chi is not the only one with talent. Suddenly, another option caught his attention. This business doesn't require good grades or rich relatives, just brute physical strength. Meanwhile, the gang members were meeting their boss Kwak Du-shik. The latter looked at the youngster with a slightly perplexed look on his face, but the assistant explained that he dared to accept him into the gang because he intended to become number one in the gangster world. In that case, the big guy decided to reveal some details about the job. They brew and sell something from the lab, as well as cut something from their enemies, after which they shove that something somewhere. Outside, a couple of police officers were watching the situation, already preparing to storm the shelter. The captain wanted to get the rampaging leader of the group at any cost. Finally, overcoming their own fear, they rushed into the room, holding their pistols in front of them. However, there was no need to use weapons, because all the participants of the secret meeting were already lying on the ground in a heap with obvious signs of beating. Kong-chi announced his return on a bench in the local park, and the next second a beggarly, handsome Han Du-jin, who is also the boy's father, emerged from the bushes. After giving him a good look at his body, the man asked him to tell him what was causing the sadness on his son's face, and he admitted that he wanted to go to the academy. "I don't look like someone who can do that," Jin laughed. Indeed, he had neither money nor connections. Suddenly his attention turned to the two beauties, who immediately received his compliments. Unable to withstand the pressure of Jin's charisma, the girls involuntarily reached into his pocket for money, and in a few moments the scoundrel was already counting the money. Finally, he turned back to his son, reminding him of his dream to be the best at something and noting that studying was clearly not his thing. Kong-chi remarked that talent alone wasn't enough for that, but the man argued with that statement. Of course, he didn't deny that other qualities were also important, but talent was an incredibly rare gift from fate. After all, he himself lives like a king among beggars only because of his dazzling beauty. Suddenly Jin ducked back into the bushes as two gentlemen appeared ahead of him, eager to see how well the bat would look in the face of the beggar who had screwed them by taking their money. Lastly, he handed his son a flyer, explaining that it was also a gift of sorts. Jin said that this was a great opportunity to channel talent, and the people from this organization helped make it happen. After reading the text, Kong-chi realized that he had finally found what he had been looking for so long. Right now, the hero department was looking for newcomers with no experience or education to join their team. And the main criterion for selection was brute physical strength. Soon, Kong-chi was already standing in front of the building indicated on the map, but besides him, another newcomer had also come here according to the announcement. The latter didn't understand how such a serious organization could be located in such a crowded place, but there could be no mistake. In any case, he decided to go inside to begin with, and was soon riding up the elevator surrounded by an exorbitantly noisy crowd. And Dae-yeon immediately realized he was in one of the cheapest neighborhoods, though there was nothing to be surprised about considering how low the company's requirements were. His parents had long reproached him for never finding a job in his 30s. He didn't know what the hero department was, but he just couldn't help but go for an interview at the only company that accepted his paperwork. After making sure the room was empty, Dae-yeon decided to deal with the irritation in his nose, but it was at that moment that a rather pretty girl walked by who was clearly not in the mood. The young man looked behind her into the corridor, where Kim Ta-and, the person in charge of office work, found him. The pretty girl with the elf ears was interested in the guest, but she seemed to be just as surprised, because Eun was the only one who responded to the invitation for the first time in 12 years. But that wasn't the end of the good news. Just today, 2 applicants came to them at once, and So Yen's dreams of automatic employment were shattered. He was asked to wait next to the second candidate, and after an awkward pause, Kang-chi decided to get acquainted. The young man didn't seem so bad to Dae-yeon, and soon they were invited to the long-awaited interview. The young man's expectations didn't come true this time either. Contrary to what was promised in the flyer, Ta-and asked in great detail about his school years, part-time jobs, and even his driver's license. After listening to the first candidate's awkward answers, the girl decided to move on to the second, but the interviewer with the scary tattoo near her found the questions too boring. He was eager to get to the point, so he directly asked if they had the power, and after hearing Kang-chi's strong affirmative answer, he happily announced that he had been accepted. Finished with business, Hwa-ran headed for the exit, but his partner ran out after him, trying to explain that it's simply not possible to conduct the selection in such a manner. Sure, the man had his own vision, but the headquarters simply wouldn't approve of such a procedure, and the man couldn't help but agree. In that case, Hwa-ran held out her pass, asking her to send these 2 to Yellow. He explained that these 2 had already been accepted and were heroes. If they could handle the trials, it would convince the headquarters, but such a suggestion clearly didn't please Ta-and. Of course, she was used to her comrades' antics, but every joke should have a limit. After all, these 2 might die in the end, but Hwa-ran was adamant. Soon the candidates were informed of their acceptance to the hero positions, and immediately their first assignment. It all seemed strange to Dae-eun from the beginning. Well, this madman asking just 2 questions finally convinced him. Now Dae-yeon had no doubt that they were in an illegal gangster group. He was about to call it quits, but the official contract, the good salary and the promised rewards made him stay. They were then led to a warehouse where they were given a pair of work slaves called transformation clothes. By the way, Kang-chi didn't even have enough belt, so he had to make do with suspenders. After that, the guys were given laser guns that looked more like children's toys, asking them not to use them in public. Suddenly a staff member remembered that these weapons would require batteries, which could be purchased at the store on the first floor, and soon the newfound heroes were ready for their first mission. They received a message on their phone from their superiors with an admonition, as well as a link to the target, which was a very popular blogger. Dae-yeon couldn't believe that they needed to exterminate a mere YouTuber, but even more worrying was the distance to their destination, an hour-and-a-half walk. The lack of money didn't stop them from enjoying the cab ride. Looking at his suit, Dae-yeon was ready to tear up at the realization of what kind of shit he was doing at his age. However, he asked his partner not to look down on a loser in his 30s who was driving around the city in a childish Power Ranger outfit, even though he had no intention of doing so. Kang-chi admitted that he hadn't accomplished much himself, but he still had hopes of becoming the best at anything. Such dreams made Dae-yeon question his partner's adequacy. At the first meeting, Kang-chi seemed like a normal boy, but with each passing minute he resembled a capricious child. In any case, they soon reached the place, deciding to keep together and help each other since there was work to be done together. Apparently, there was some kind of fair going on in the park at that moment, so Dae-yeon had no idea how to look for the right YouTuber among such a mass of people. Suddenly, his attention was caught by the crowd, saying the name of their favorite chip, and in the middle of them, a man in a pink teddy bear costume jumped on the stage. Then the autograph session began, which resulted in a one-on-one meet and greet between the guys and the target. At first, Chip mistook them for festival workers, but upon hearing that they were heroes, he admitted that he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. After getting the producer's permission to go, Chip led the heroes to a secret location to hand over items needed by each trainee. He admitted that he was helping all the heroes, because they were so great. Soon, they came to the trash cans where the bear had hidden the items, but only stinky black bags were inside. Suddenly, Dae-yeon jumped up from a powerful kick, and Kang-chi found himself pinned against the wall by a powerful paw. Baring his sharp teeth, Chip admitted that it wasn't easy for him to restrain himself surrounded by such a crowd of people. The young man immediately reached for his gun, but the bear knocked the weapon out of his hands with a sharp movement. First, he decided to taste the hero and without any delay bit off his hand. Unable to cope with the pain, Kang-chi simply passed out, but the next moment he kicked the bear in the stomach with all his might. Although this confused Chip somewhat, he responded by attacking the unfortunate schoolboy himself, smashing his body through the wall opposite. Of course, the villain was going to play for a long time, but now the plans had changed, and so he pounced on the victim, wanting to swallow him whole. His teeth were about to close, when suddenly another hero appeared between the predator and the victim. Because of the device in the stranger's hands, Chip lost the ability to move, but still found the strength to jump back. When the villain asked him who was in front of him, the man introduced himself as the captain of the hero's first squad, Yen Poon, nicknamed Wind Elf. Chip had no doubt that he was not an ordinary man, but this hero is strikingly different from those kids. In an attempt to get out of the predicament, the bear recalled the peace treaty with mankind, although he himself broke it. These words seemed to the hero an incredible impudence, although he would have killed the villain anyway for what he had done to the trainees. The next second the bear jumped on the roof and started to run, realizing that otherwise he would definitely become a corpse. But after a few meters he came face to face with the hero again, and soon he was begging for forgiveness. Chip promised to surrender, explaining, justifying that those two first attacked him, and he was just defending himself, but Yen Pun repeated that he would be killed anyway. The next moment the hero began to wave his device in different directions, plunging the villain into the very vortex of the powerful vortex. He tried to hold on as best he could, but his real appearance gradually began to come out, and soon there was no trace left of the cute teddy bear. Chip couldn't admit that he had met a worthy opponent, but he still offered to surrender, confident that no one could defeat him in this form of a yellow danger-level monster. Suddenly, he felt something strange in his side, the exact spot where Kang-chi's kick had landed. In any case, he decided to ignore it, and since his true nature had been revealed, no one would be able to leave this place alive. It opened its jaws wide, intending to devour the hero, but in the next second, first its jaw and then its entire body was chopped into many small pieces, and the wind elf headed towards the injured trainee with the same cold-blooded look. Ta and I reported that the condition was still unstable, though the worst was over, and right now, the cells of the right arm were being regenerated. Casting a glance at Kang-chi, the hero couldn't understand what had happened. He looked completely normal until the moment his arm was bitten off. Yen Pun asked if there were any more craft around, and the assistant reported a half-monster that had changed shape about 5 hours ago. Its danger level was green, so the master didn't have to deal with such a case, but Pun still asked not to pass the information to another department. Picking up Kang-chi, the man warned that he himself was moving out to the location to see if there was anything special about this newcomer. A strange voice sounded in Kang-chi's ears, urging him to wake up. Barely opening his eyes, he found a humanoid lizard in front of him, who was clearly happy to see Mr. Hero awaken. Pointing to the bloody bodies behind him, the monster confessed that it had simply wanted to kill the company employees who had bullied him, but the feeling of power and authority had disrupted the plans, so a little more people had died. Still, it wasn't enough, and so he wished to test his powers on someone like a hero. It's so ridiculous that the latter is now just sprawled out here sleeping. And the inscription on his stomach threatening to exterminate all monsters made the monster mad, so he tried to attack him. After dodging the first attack, the young man took a moment to think. He was confused, as he clearly remembered the distraught Chip, who had torn off his arm before he passed out. Meanwhile, the lizard continued to press on, and with each successive evasion it seemed to him that this hero was somewhat weak. Grabbing the young man by the head, the monster pressed him into the ground with force, and then began unleashing powerful blows one after another, furious that some dead man had been sent after him. Suddenly he stopped. What if he's not too weak, but I'm too damn strong? The monster thought as the figure of Yen Poon suddenly appeared in front of him. For a second, the man thought that the previous incident with Chip was a mere coincidence, but the next moment, Kang-chi was back on his feet. The lizard was quite surprised that the guy had survived his blow, but now decided to finally end the matter. Gathering all the power in his fist, the monster brought it down on his opponent's head, but he continued to stand firmly in place as if he didn't feel anything. Suddenly, Kang-chi raised his head, his crazed gaze staring literally into his opponent's soul. In the next moment, he retaliated with a blow so powerful that it made a hole in the monster's side, causing it to fall to the ground dead. Looking at the exhausted newcomer with a glance, Yen Pun grinned. "It's been a long time since we've had such curious guys," he said with a happy and somewhat mad expression on his face. Meanwhile, a man with a cold goat-like expression reminded him that in this place called Utopia, everyone was a partner who shared the same dream. Everyone here is always sure of each other, but the latest incident with Chip's murder had raised some doubts in the superior's minds. It was for this reason that he wondered if this was also part of the plan. In response, the girl asked if he had ever tried cooking freshly cut meat. Despite its tempting color, the shrunken muscles and lactic acid would make it taste truly disgusting. Even the best cooks can't solve this problem, so you can only enjoy the dish after a while until the microorganisms and enzymes break down the hardness of the meat. Opening her sharp teeth to swallow a bite, she advised her superiors to just wait. Suddenly a second assistant ran up to them, shouting trouble. He showed the foreman a tablet on which the news was blaring about the tragic death of Chip, a national favorite. The pink plush remains scattered in one of the alleyways made it clear that he had been the victim of a brutal murder by those who had failed to adapt to the era of peace that had come more than a dozen years ago. Suddenly, N-Pun slapped the wall right above Tani's head with force, accusing the assistant of being unable to handle even the basic job of covering up the aftermath. In fact, the master couldn't understand why he would even bother about it. After all, it wasn't his fault that negligent employees had allowed the leak to happen. But Warren, who had inexplicably appeared from nowhere, made it clear that the responsibility for his subordinates rested on the leader's shoulders. The relationship between the two nutcases was already bad enough, and this accusation added even more fuel to the fire. The heroes were about to clash when they were interrupted by Director Yul's booming voice. He didn't understand why these two were acting like this despite what had happened. The director had noticed that the monster leader had already reached its final stage, but the plush remains were a rejected piece that simply couldn't be. Besides, he completely trusted Ta-Ni, who was heard to be one of the most experienced experts in the company's entire existence. He believed that she simply couldn't have made such a ridiculous mistake. In any case, the hype raised by the news would be handled by the headquarters, and the government members would continue to remain silent after making a few loud statements. Still, the director well understood the urgency of the situation, because the primary task is to maintain an era of peace, so he expressed his willingness to take responsibility for the fate of the heroes. Eun-Pung didn't object, except that he was just sure that this wasn't the main reason why the director had decided to come here. "You can't be fooled," Yul laughed and admitted that the reason for the visit was the news of a promising trainee. A rookie who had stood up to a yellow-level monster could not go unnoticed, and that was why the headmaster was here. Still, the man remarked that you can't recruit people without an exam, ignoring the headquarters' instructions. Warren promised to send a newcomer immediately, and Eun-Pung didn't object either. In that case, Zhang Yul asked to escort him, which somewhat confused the Wind Elf. He asked for someone else to be entrusted with the task, in response to which the headmaster reminded him of the unique tradition of heroes that a master should assist the trainee of his branch. This is an opportunity to show that the master has personally selected and mentored the newcomer on the right path to fight evil. With the other three branches adhering to this rule, Eun-Pun would have to follow suit. Soon the master was already sitting behind the wheel of the car, promising to kill everyone who was in the hospital. By the way, he was also unhappy that the trainee didn't have a license, and upon hearing the objections that a high school student simply couldn't drive a car, he asked him to just shut up. Anyway, he explained that the upcoming test was a small thing. Just a little test to show if the trainee is capable of becoming a hero in a couple days. "If you come back, I'll definitely make sure you have a sweet job," the mentor warned with his characteristic crazy look. His father, to whom Kong Chi had also decided to inform about the upcoming 3-day trip, was delighted that the young man was able to carve out a place for himself in this terribly competitive world called the labor market. Although he was worried about his son, who would not be able to enjoy his parents' beautiful smile for a few days, he did not discourage him. Before leaving for the place, the young man asked to stop at one more place. As he pulled up in front of Dae-Yun's house, who no longer remembered his former partner, Kong Chi thanked the cab driver for paying, returning the favor. As he darted between cars on the busy highway, the trainee remembered one more thing and thanked Yen-Pun for saving him from the monster's clutches, though the mentor only asked him to shut up again. Well, if you enjoyed this story and want to see part 2, write the secret word in the comments. Hero. That way I'll know you've seen this video to the end. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, as it's very important to me. Also, you can write the genre of titles that you like so I can do what you like. That's all for now. See you all again and bye-bye.